Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I have a little treat today, man. I am joined here today by Chris Borland. He was a collegiate standout at the University of Wisconsin. He was drafted in the third round of San Francisco, had a breakout rookie season, and surprisingly, he gained notoriety for walking away from the game of football at age 24. Thank you for joining us today, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's an early morning, man, so I appreciate your presence, brother.
Hey, good way to get a Sunday started.
Right. So I want to talk to you a little about your background, man. So like, how did you first get into football? I think everybody that entered the NFL, usually they start young. So what was your...
That's right. I grew up in Southwest Ohio, so football hotbed. And my dad had played college linebacker at Miami University in Ohio. He grew up in Wisconsin, so I kind of inherited this incredible passion for football through the Packers, and it's like a religion up there. Oh, yeah. So was really born into it, but uniquely, I'm one of 7 kids in my family. I've got 1 sister and 5 brothers, and my dad made all the boys wait until high school to play football. So somewhat unique in that regard. I think that choice on his part predated any of these concerns about brain injury.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe he knew intuitively as a guy that played in college, certainly knew about the physical consequences, but right. I'm really glad he made that choice because I think injuries aside, it was great for us athletically. We loved football, and I'd beg him every fall to play. All my friends were playing, and is this an explicit podcast? I can curse on this?
Oh, of course.
Every kid in my neighborhood, every kid on the team was calling me a pussy for not playing football. And I just wanted to play because I wanted to play the game, but that also kind of ate up at me. And then once I did play my freshman year of high school, I knew it was it. Like I'd fallen completely in love with it. I quit soccer. I basically quit basketball. I played for 1 more year, but it was all football from then on.
So what kept your interest in football, even though you weren't able to play when you were a kid? Because I started at the age of 7, contact football, and I mean, there's not much contact when you're a kid, but it kept my interest. That kept me loving to come. I love the smell of the grass. I loved it. Like, so what kept your interest in the game?
Simply being a fan, one. I mean, we would every Sunday watch the Packers. They were on a lot because even though I was growing up in Southwest Ohio, because those were the Favre and Reggie White and Leroy Butler years, so they were always on. And then I probably played more backyard football than anyone ever. My neighborhood, it's crazy. I was thinking about this the other day, talking to a kid I grew up with. 5 brothers. All my older brothers played a college sport. My next door neighbor was an All-American in track. Down the street, I mean, it was like 20 kids in our neighborhood, without exaggeration, that were college-level athletes. Right. And then we literally had an empty lot at the end of our street. So we didn't have to say anything. It was just every day there was something going on at the lot. So I played so much backyard football that, honestly, when I started my freshman year of high school, the tackle that we were playing on our team was softer than what I'd played.
On the street. Yeah, of course. I saw. I was looking at when I was doing some research on you. I saw you do this play in high school. It was probably one of the greatest high school plays I've ever seen in my life. Like you jumped over the line and tackled. Like, so you was nice, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I tried to. One thing they don't tell you, they make that video look like that was 3rd and short, right? And stopped them, and it was, they had to punt. They went for it on 4th down, ran the same play, and got a first down.
Oh, they got it? Oh, man.
I don't tell anybody that.
But, you kind of took the glory out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still all right, man.
But thanks, yeah. I tried to play with reckless abandon. I loved Troy Polamalu. He was probably my favorite defensive player to watch growing up.
Oh, yeah.
I love the way Favre played the game. I mean, I know I played a different position, but just getting after it, having fun. I love making plays like that.
No, for sure, man. So you go to college, and you got it was a full ride, correct?
Yeah.
Full scholarship to University of Wisconsin, and you played with some killers, man.
Yeah.
You played with Russell Wilson, correct?
Yeah.
Russell Wilson.
Yeah. 1 year.
J.J. Watt.
J.J. for a couple years.
Who else did you play with that are?
Monty Ball was a Heisman finalist.
Yeah, Monty
Came
Ball.
in with Monty. James White. Lots of great players. Lance Kendricks is a long-time NFL. Right. Garrett Graham, who you played with.
Right. So you played with a lot of cats, man. So what was your experience like in college? Because you were a history major, and I think that's rare for a college, a football D1 athlete to major in. I was a rare major as well. I majored in philosophy, so usually you have your cookie cutter degrees, and then you have your outliers, and you were one of the outliers. So what made you go with history?
I was always interested in history and civics and politics from an early age. Yeah, I think looking back, maybe political science may have been more appropriate for my interests because I love 20th century history, more contemporary history. But I can remember meetings with academic advisors. Kind of, you could sense them wanting to funnel you into. Wisconsin. It's sociology.
Of course,
every school has their their funnel major.
Oh yeah.
I think for me it was personal interest. I had a few great professors. Wisconsin has a world-renowned history department. Didn't know what I wanted to do early on, but once I'd had a few classes, took the history of the United States educational system, which is a really interesting class, history of U.S. labor policy too, and with two incredible professors. So once I got a taste of that, is what I wanted to do.
So you took advantage of your academia. I was one of those cats that really didn't. I went to college to try to join the NFL. Like that was my farm club. That's admirable, man. I think that probably has something to do with the way your dad held off on football. I think because I mean a lot of us. It was interesting when I was reading your story. Like a lot of us, like from the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and the cats that end up going to the NFL, it was like either all or nothing. Like there was no fallback plan. So it was interesting to see your choice like that. So what kind of background did your and support system did you have from your parents?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I wasn't that serious of a student in high school or early on in college.
You sound like it now.
But I was always more interested in things than I cared about being a good student. I got expelled in 8th grade. I'd regularly, forget about the schoolwork we had to do and not fuck around, but read what I was interested in. It never made sense to me that, you're assigned this long list of things to read when it's not your passion. I can remember button heads with my 8th grade history professor. I guess at that time it's called social studies because we're reading some. This guy was an idiot. He was talking.
Shout him out.
No. He was talking about how the Civil War was fought over states' rights and not slavery.
Oh man, that's usually a Southern idea.
Yeah. So I had to.
I just had a guy named Clay Travis on the podcast, and
I'm familiar with him.
Oh yeah, so he feels the same way, and we talked about that, man. We disagree. He kind of walked it back a little bit, but. It's out there. That ideology is definitely out there, man. But so to get into the crux of why you're here and why you gain so much notoriety, man. You walked away. You get drafted. Beautiful time for yourself and your family. You always wanted to do it. You get drafted in the 3rd round, which I didn't get drafted. I never got to feel that. So you're elated. And then you play a great rookie season, a really good rookie season. I think you filled in for Patrick Willis, if I don't recall.
Yeah.
So I remember hearing about you, like, yo, they got a young rookie that's nice. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, to us, it seemed like you just walked away. And I could let you tell a little bit more about that, but I want to know the straw that broke the camel's back, because we all kind of heard about the CTE stuff. We all hear about it, but what was the definitive, like, there's no way I could risk it anymore?
There wasn't one piece of information or one experience that was the straw. I think there's a tipping point when you learn everything that's going on, and related to your personal experience. When you're not fully invested, like you talked about earlier, when you're not ready to live for and maybe even die for the passion of playing,
right.
It's really hard to justify going out there. You can tell the guys that play for a paycheck. You can tell the guys that are lukewarm about it. I think what's unique about my evaluation, I can get into what I researched and what I've experienced.
I don't want to hear it. Yeah.
But is that I didn't care to make money, and I really don't care about fame. I'm fortunate. I come from a background where I have more security. I'm not a meal ticket for anybody. I'm single. And I have a little bit of money put away regardless. So I empathize.
How old are you now?
27.
27.
I empathize with guys who, I had teammates who said I'd do the same thing if it weren't for me taking care of these folks.
Oh, 100%.
So I think the difference was not caring as much about money, not caring as much about fame. And then because as I looked into this, I thought maybe I'll play for 3 years, get the pension, and get out. And then that for me kind of made me sick. I wanted to be great, or I'll do something else and try to be great at that. The information I'd looked into, I think we're all a little willfully ignorant, particularly when we're playing.
Oh, of course. It won't happen to me.
Yeah, and if I just stay focused, I know something's probably there, but if I just don't pay attention to it, it'll go away. Mm-hmm. I was concussed in camp. I just would lead play with Will, Big Will. I can never pronounce his last name. Will Tuyaka. He played at Oregon. Big 290-pound fullback.
Okay.
We just ran in a lead play.
Yeah.
And, you know how it is. I think the timing of it made me think differently. Your eligibility doesn't run out in the NFL.
Yeah.
I wanted to be, I know it sounds lofty, a small third-round draft. I wanted to be a Hall of Famer. That was my goal.
No, we all had those goals.
Yeah.
For sure.
After that, I just started looking into it. And
so what was your first step? Sorry to cut you off, man, but what was your first step into researching it? Because the news kind of started swirling. And so what was the first thing that caught your eye? It was like, let me do a little bit more research.
Oh, I mean, it started with Google searches. I'd heard the term CTE. I didn't know what it stood for.
Right.
Other than Mike Webster, who was the first case, a Wisconsin alum, and Junior Seau, I didn't know of many stories. I think Junior took his life in 2012, which was my junior year of college. So you have to be a little taken aback when that happens.
Yeah. So for the people that don't know, man, what does CTE stand for?
It stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Encephalopathy.
Sound like a Sesame Street word.
Snuffleupagus and encephalopathy. It was discovered in 2005, but really it's the first cousin of punch drunk syndrome, which was discovered in 1928.
Right.
So it really just almost took us 90 years to extrapolate it to football. But it's a disease that's caused by repetitive injury. So that's a framing I think the media often gets wrong as they talk about concussions. There's a lot of guys who've had CT upon autopsy that have never been diagnosed with a concussion.
Right.
Learning those type of things, and to the biomechanics of the injury. So the problem's your brain inside your skull.
Right.
It's not anything external. So I think a lot of players, and I was this way, had this false sense of security where we're not boxers because I have a helmet on.
Right.
But it's about inertia, the brain moving inside the skull. So,
yeah. And isn't there what's the protein called that actually gets on the brain?
It's tau protein.
Tau.
So the problem's inflammation. So after a brain injury, the tau floods your system because it's trying to heal.
Right.
But what happens is it lays down these tracks it kind of entangles healthy brains. So your neurotransmitters can't fire and connect. So it's like an interception. I guess that's a perverse pun.
Yeah. Pretty weak. Nah. So basically it is a disease that interrupts the neuro connections between the brains, which is the electrical signals that send the to-do lists to all your muscles, all your extremities, everything. It controls everything. And so what was the most, because I read that you went and you talked to the actual doctors that did these studies, that conducted these studies. So what was the most breathtaking thing that was like, holy shit, this is real? Because it didn't hit me until it was real, until I was already retired. Like, I didn't pay any attention to it. Like, you hear about it and you're like, yeah, but whatever.
Yeah, I think before even talking to the people that were doing the science, I think the Boston University Brain Bank, when I really learned about that, first off, I didn't know it existed.
Right.
And then I learned that it exists, and I see that at the time 95% of the brains studied there had this pathology.
Right.
It is a biased sample, that's worth noting. But the names in the list and the guys in the list, I used to think, when I first started looking into it, well, Webster made sense. He played for 20 years, used steroids, drank, pills, all that. Junior played for 16 years. There's a lot of guys that even before I made it to the NFL, I'd played more football then. I went both ways in high school, a small Catholic school, played for over 4 years at Wisconsin. Lots of hits, and then those neighborhood games growing up. And then just other shit with, family, friends. To see guys that like played sparingly in college, and then maybe played a little bit in Canada or on a practice squad, have like significant pathology, shocked me. That middle ground was the holy shit for me.
Yeah. I was researching the brains that they and the study that they conducted. They said so it's over 202 deceased former football players in total, and a combination of high school, college, and professional players. And 177 of them were diagnosed. 110 out of 111 are former NFL players. That was shocking to me. And what was even more shocking to me was how people tried to dodge those results. And they said it's confirmation bias and yada yada. I'm like, who gives a shit about, like, these are people who play football. Like, unless you have another sample study, this is what we're going off of right now. Like, that shit pissed me off. But to me, it was very indicative of how the NFL and the brand that it is markets to the general public.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a fair point that it is a biased sample.
Is it though? Is that a fair point?
It is, because there's a self-selection. So people, particularly now, because beforehand it was they thought they were getting control samples.
Right.
I've got a friend I'm having coffee with later this morning whose dad was case number 17. They submitted his brain because they thought it'd be a great control because he never had quote unquote concussions.
And he played in the NFL.
He played a long time ago. He played started in the late 50s and played for a decade and coached for 30 years.
Right.
So it is a biased sample, but even for a biased sample, 95 to 99% is unheard of.
That's insane.
Lifelong smokers, 1 in 10 gets lung cancer.
Jesus.
So playing professional football, far more dangerous than just from the perspective of health for your brain than smoking is for your lungs.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, what would be an unbiased sample? A punter? Like a deceased punter?
Yeah, I mean, so there's been other studies. In December of 2015, the Mayo Clinic did a study of amateur players through college in all contact sports.
Right.
And they found that a third had CTE pathology. They had a control group, 198 brains of people that had no history of brain trauma, and not a single case had the pathology. So 0 out of 198.
So what did they consider contact sports, though?
Yeah, hockey was included, girls soccer, which has a huge concussion problem and brain injury problem, and then obviously football. That to me speaks to causality, and I mean I still occasionally do some advocacy. Last week I was on a panel, and I can't believe he said that. I don't want to say his name, but there's a sports medicine person from a major university say,
Call him out, bro.
No. We need proof of harm before we do something rash. And he was talking about youth tackle football.
Oh, see, and that's why I think you should call him out, because I think that's bullshit. If you're, because what he's doing is dangerous. And I think what he's doing is dangerous. It's like you said in one of your analogies. It's like the tobacco companies or the FDA, how they hid sugar was bad for it. Like for years, these studies they were holding them back, and you're actually hurting people.
Yeah.
So like if you're sitting here advocating, well, maybe we shouldn't let kids play. Like my kids ain't playing football.
No.
Like you got to fight me, and if you wins, you could play, but no. So like the damage that they're gonna end up doing to these kids, sitting on a maybe. I think you have to. I think in any case, it's the best option to go with what is true as we know it, and all we know right now is that there is probably a link, more than probably a link. So why not?
Exactly. Yeah, and I was particularly irked by the words he used. So this is an MD. This is a guy that's taken the Hippocratic Oath, and he's saying we need proof of harm before we do anything. I mean, the Hippocratic Oath, the number one tenet is do no harm. So this guy's, we're going to prove we're hurting kids, and then we'll do something. Well, scientific, on paper, that makes sense, But in the meantime, you've got 1.3 million kids, 18 and under playing tackle football. We're just going to wait and see how their lives play out before you learn enough to.
Yeah.
It's senseless.
The risk versus reward is not, and it doesn't even make any sense to me if you're saying, maybe, we don't know if we're doing any harm. Like, if you don't know, then why are you? What is something rash? That doesn't make any sense to me. Before we do something rash, like save kids, that doesn't make any sense.
And then on top of all of this, the ridiculous part is it's 5 to 13. Who gives a shit about? That's ridiculous. Like, why do we play games? I mean, we do it for the people, the players, not the other way around. So I think it's changing for the better. There's a few laws that are proposed. Sylvia Mackey, John Mackey's wife, the Hall of Famer, she's helped get legislation proposed in New York State. There's the same in Maryland and one upcoming in Illinois to ban youth tackle until a couple of those are 14, one is 12, which I'm supporting.
I think it's only a matter of time. And I was having this conversation with somebody a while back, but I'm unsure how long the popularity of football will last. I think right now it'll be what it is. Excuse me. And I think in the future, 50, 60 years from now, I don't see it, because the science is going to get more and more clear. And I don't see how repetitive hits to the head is a good thing. As a kid, when I was growing up, you just called them little stingers, little dingers, or you just got whatever. And you push through it, but as you grow and as an adult, you realize this shit's starting to. Because I've had multiple concussions. I know I've played through multiple concussions, and part of the reason why was because I didn't want to lose my spot. In college, you don't want to seem not tough to the coaches, yada yada. I know those kind of sentiments are kind of dying out because the public pressure. But in the future, what do you see for football? Because in 50, 60, I don't see how you can have all of this sponsorship money around a game that's actually killing people.
Yeah, personally, I'm apathetic towards its future. I don't care one way or the other.
Right. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like fighting to have it banned. But if football went away tomorrow, it wouldn't affect my personal life.
Right. So you have no interest in football at all right now?
Other than supporting having kids wait until high school. That's about the extent.
So you don't watch or anything like that?
I don't. It's not. I mean, I'm not angry. It's not like a.
It's
not like a protest. It's
you're not like a bitter ex-wife. I know that. I'm
just saying. Plus, I think I got it out of my system. I mean, I was played a lot in college, accomplished what I wanted to. I played a lot of football in a brief period of time, so I understand why fans who've never played are so they have it. They've romanticized it a little bit, and they're obsessed with it. So I think it'll continue to be played for quite some time. I think we'll see the continued trend of people without options playing.
Yeah.
So Frank DeFord, the famous journalist, said this before he passed away, is that football participation isn't really a conversation on health. It's more of a political commentary. Last night I happened to be flipping through Netflix and saw Snoop Dogg's latest show, and on some level I understand it's better to have somewhere to be between 3 and 5:30 each day.
Well, that's the point I brought up earlier, where it was like some of these kids, and I was one of those kids where this was our way out, whether it be football or basketball, or it's hard when you don't have a lot of opportunities in some of these neighborhoods, and a lot of these opportunities are our athletic gifts for whatever reason, and that's probably the driving force I see as to why. And the education, like a lot of these people who grew up, their parents aren't the most educated. That's just the circumstances of our neighborhoods. And the more information that we can get to them, I think will do nothing but benefit them. But as of now, it's kind of just like this. People view it as a paper shark, but I don't think it is.
Well, I think, and I thought about this watching last night. Also, I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio, and Dayton's like a little Detroit in a lot of ways. We've lost a lot of jobs, a lot of industry. Really, the only people in downtown Dayton are those that need representation, and then the attorneys that work down there to represent them. It's kind of fallen on hard times. So I'm involved in a couple of projects where we're trying to use sports to help kids. And I had a unique experience in 4th through 6th grade. I was the only white kid on an all-black inner-city basketball team. It was really enlightening to me because...
Had to hold your own there.
Had to hold my own. Well, I was our best player. They came after to give me. Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
yeah.
Okay. I don't believe that, man.
Well, hey, you can call Coach Powell. Let him tell you. But it was enlightening for me because sometimes I played soccer too, and sometimes I'd have tournaments back-to-back weekends, and so I'd play with these yuppies whose parents were paying a lot of money for them to be travel soccer players.
Right.
Hear things, basically racist things, and then the next weekend go play with. We were named the Dayton Airmen. We were named after the Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that experience was, and I was 10 through 12.
Wow.
That was eye-opening.
All right.
I think that's kind of where we see football.
Yeah, of course.
So watching last night's Snoop Dogg show, I understand completely. Like, it's great that they have something. However, I think maybe the adults can intervene and provide something that doesn't, retool it, play flag.
All right.
It's hard. I don't want to pretend it's that simple.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a black and white issue. But it's just like you were saying in one of the things I was reading. It's just like there's other powers that at work, right? Or the powers that be are at work, right? So people who are either huge advertisers paying people for junk science, and that's the most disheartening thing, is that the paycheck is worth more than the actual truth.
Yeah, and I think to the average fan, the NFL and football in general, you think of it as a game. Like, it's an industry.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
The NFL backs USA football. If you got over 1 million kids wearing a $120 helmet apiece, Riddell's got a highly vested interest in youth tackle.
Yep.
There's all of these intertwined things that are obstacles to making sensible changes. But people don't think, when they think football, they think, what they enjoy doing with their family, maybe their fond memories of playing briefly in high school. It's hard to think of it as industry if you haven't played big time college or in the NFL.
And I don't know where this romanticism comes from, that sporting events aren't business. Even like you said, even at the youth level. Like, I remember going to high school. Like, I didn't feel as strongly as about it as I did when I went to college. But going to high school, and you have to pay a ticket to go watch high school players play, and I was like, that's just odd to me. Yeah. But it didn't really bother me. And then I went to college, and I was like, no, this is just complete bullshit.
It's such a crime what's going on. I don't know if you've read Taylor Branch's article in The Atlantic a few years ago. You got to read it. Taylor Branch is a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, and he covered civil rights. He was asked to write about college sports by The Atlantic magazine, I think in 2012. And this is a guy who's famous for his work in civil rights. After writing that, he's probably as well known for this piece. I think the final line he had in it was that college athletics have a whiff of the plantation.
You talking about angering people when you say that?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's Harry Edwards. He's a famous sociologist, sports sociologist. He helped organize the 1968 Mexico City Olympic protest.
Oh, I actually had John Carlos on the podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
awesome. He'll know Harry well. Dr. Edwards was a liaison for us with the 49ers.
Okay. So
enjoyed having a few conversations about these topics. And I think he wrote a book in the 80s about, if you watched an SEC football game, it looks who's in the stands, who's on the field. It's obvious.
It really is, and that's what it bothers me. But I think it's all connected, from the stance that you took to the sentiment of the public. I think they're very intermingled. If it was, I feel like it was a white generated sport, people would look at it differently. I always used to tell people, like, if I was 7 years old and somebody was to document my life and I said, I want to be a doctor, And at 7 years old, I said I was gonna be a doctor. And I went to the library every single day after school, and I read the books, and I understood everything. And I got a full ride to Harvard or Oxford or whatever the case may be. And fresh out of college, I have whatever the case may be, and I land a great job being a brain surgeon. And I had that goal since I was 7 years old. You'd be like, that is insane that you had that wherewithal and you had the drive. Since 7 years old, you knew what you wanted to do. Well, if you just fill in the blanks and put football player in there, it's the same thing. Like, some of these kids have been one-track minded for decades, and then finally they get their payday, and it's like, oh, you're just an overpaid athlete. Like, you know how hard it was?
Oh, yeah.
And people have no idea.
Yeah. I think some of that is a little bit of animosity.
Of course.
I mean,
of course.
I experienced that just going to college, where you could tell all my buddies from high school that wanted to play in college and who hadn't had a little bit of chip on their shoulder. Mm-hmm. I think that's true of anything.
That's when they turn into. I could have been a high school All-American. I tell you.
There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys who were one injury away.
Oh yeah, man.
My junior year, I hurt my shoulder. Couldn't get any good film on tape.
Coach wouldn't play me.
But yeah, I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
Look at the CT kicking it. No, I was playing. Actually, I do that a lot, man. But I was actually wanted to know if you had any blowback from like either current NFL players, former NFL players, or the NFL in general, like for the stance you took. And you were very outspoken about it.
Yeah. I got your run-of-the-mill criticism. Right. A lot, all the tough guys who are, can't acknowledge reality to call me a pussy. And,
I saw. Oh, you really just like that?
Yeah.
Straight up?
Yeah.
Who? You don't like calling people out?
No, I don't. There was tamer critiques. There was quitter and things like that, which on some level is probably true.
That's insane to me.
Yeah. But you know what? It's an insecurity. If you've digested it all and it makes sense, and you still choose to participate, which I've got friends playing in the Super Bowl today who we just agree to disagree.
Right.
Then you wouldn't say those things. But if you know that I'm right on some level, that's why you project those. Oh, you're this or you're that.
For sure. Because I saw Roger Goodell, like it impacted. It was impactful, and like Roger Goodell came out and actually spoke about it as well.
Yeah, and
he was lying.
Yeah, well, they're clever lies, though. I mean, safer than ever sounds really good to moms across America.
Yeah, of course.
It doesn't mean shit.
Uh-huh.
There's never been a safer time to hit yourself in the face with a hammer either.
True.
Does that make it safe?
Right. Now's the best time ever.
Yeah. So they haven't owned up to it, really. I know they admitted a link in 2016, but
I just hate the dishonesty. Like, I hate the dishonesty because I feel like when we were growing up, there was no. That's why I didn't pay attention to it when the news started breaking out around 2012, 13, 14. By that time, I was already knee deep in. I was already 4 or 5 years in the league or whatever, and I wasn't coming. I was going to finish my career because it was going to take so much to sway me. But like, these kids now have access to information like we never did. It's just a click away, and the fact that they're trying to dilute this information. It's almost sick to me. And that's how I look at the NFL anyway. It's just this big business that doesn't give a shit about anything but that bottom line, I mean. Like, if you look at things like Thursday Night Football. I hate how they love to wave that player safety flag, and then you have something like Thursday Night Football. If you ever played down a football in the trenches and you had to get ready for a Thursday night game, you know damn well they don't give a shit about you.
No.
They don't care about your body.
No. We played Sunday night, Thursday night, late in the season. And it was my first exposure to it. We knew they don't have 4-day rests in college.
Right.
We didn't even practice. No one could walk.
Walk-throughs.
I mean, yeah. That's just, and I think the quality of play in Thursday night games is evident of how ridiculous that is.
And then, I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say one point about the industry watering down and conflating and distracting on the science. I think it's a good strategy that they have, because there is this sliver of gap between correlation and causation.
I hate that shit.
And they just live in that gap, and they blow up and magnify and sell that gap. And
it's the only place they can live.
Yeah, true. And so it's safer than ever, and the game's evolving, and the science is. these idioms that don't mean anything, but sound so good, and you can give them their due. It's crass marketing, but it has no substance.
Oh, they know what they're doing. Yeah. It was just like what the tobacco industry did. You're right. That was like, it was a brilliant analogy is what you compared it to. But to go back to the point, it's this perpetual cycle of pretending like you care about players, but you don't. Like the whole painkiller epidemic. I got pumped with painkillers, but I can't smoke weed because it's a street drug. Yeah. That's insane. But yet they're going to put $100 million towards painkiller research, but not marijuana research. It's ridiculous.
Oh, it's absurd. Again, I think that's an industry influence. A lot of football fans come from Middle America, where the same type of places our Attorney General Jeff Sessions comes from, and he wants to treat marijuana like it's heroin.
Look at you, your history degree kicking in.
And the war on drugs is one of the most horrible American domestic policies we've ever had. And it's targeted liberals and black people. The Nixon administration admitted as much. So,
and this is what kills me about conservative thought today is that link. They sit on this fence of statistics, and they just deny that link. And I don't understand how they do that, because like statistics can be skewed either way. But if you look at overwhelmingly, there are colored folk going to jail for drugs, and the fact that marijuana is still a Schedule I drug that should be a crime in itself. Yeah, that is insane. Yeah.
Have you seen 13?
13? Documentary?
Yeah, wow.
Beautiful documentary.
Yeah, everybody listening should check that out. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, which sits at the confluence of Interstate 70 and Interstate 75.
Right.
So if you want to get from Miami to Chicago, you have to be on 75 for a period of time. If you want to get from the West Coast to New York City, you got to be on 70.
I heard this in a lot of rap songs, man.
I'm not a huge rap guy, but I imagine. So Dayton sits right at the confluence of those two interstates. Lots and lots and lots of drugs get trafficked through the Dayton Mall. There's a heroin overdose almost every day.
That's insane.
We're in the midst of an opioid epidemic. The fact that 65,000 people died in 2017 from opioid overdoses, and it's on the rise in 2018. We have something where we've seen it in Washington and Oregon and other states that have legalized medical over ODs on opioids and painkillers and fentanyl and all of that has gone down dramatically, like by 25%. It's been a boon for Colorado's economy. I'm not saying there isn't negative side effects from marijuana. It's not entirely benevolent, but in light of what else is going on, it's such a healthier alternative.
Not even close.
And we see it with former NFL players. Like it's
I smoke weed.
Yeah, and I do too.
It's a beautiful, beautiful plant.
Yeah, and it's California just legalized recreational. I don't even really like being high. It just helps me with a little bit of pain and helps with sleep.
That's insane that you don't like being high.
To a point.
I hear you.
You can get
No, I don't like being like totally out of control where I'm like stuck. I don't like being stuck. I like to be able to operate.
Yeah.
But I know cats that can connect like 3 or 4 blunts and just be operative. And I'm like, how are you able to walk right now?
Yeah. I just don't want to lose touch with reality. Like I like,
I think you fall asleep before that happens, man. True. OD on pizza.
Yeah.
So what do you feel, as far as your future, what do you feel is the best? Well, what are you doing now? Like, what is your day-to-day life like? How you keep the lights on?
Yeah.
Because you walk away from millions of dollars.
I just jumped into something I'm really excited about. I didn't jump into it. I've been doing it for 2 years, but we ran a pilot program in meditation with former NFL players.
Oh, wow.
At the Center for Healthy Minds in Madison, Wisconsin. The first of its kind. Was a really successful study that we're hoping to get into more and more populations. And then off of that, I've started a company that's doing that same curriculum with active athletes. I think it's crazy that we do so much to train our bodies and to learn a playbook if it's football or basketball, all of these things. And then you send a kid out in front of in football 100,000, in basketball 20,000, an 18-year-old kid, and you've done nothing to train his mind. So
it's definitely neglected.
Yeah, and then off the field too. I mean, it's a stressful life to have. Just meditation is a tool that helps you just get along smoother throughout life.
I've always been interested in meditation because I'm a huge fan of Sam Harris. Mm-hmm. You've heard of Sam Harris?
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of Sam Harris, and he is an advocate for meditation. And he almost, and this is why I'm like totally against people praying, because it's not real. There is kind of a link between that prayer and meditation, and so that's why I'm okay with people praying. Yeah. Like, people, like, do your thing, but meditation is. He likens it to almost like a psychedelic experience, and he claims to have had psychedelic experiences on it. I mean, have you delved deep into the research of meditation?
Yeah, big time. So,
school me.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. A great entree into it for you and for anyone listening would be Dan Harris's, no relation to Sam Harris, his podcast, 10% Happier. So Dan wrote a book called 10% Happier. He's a real type A personality. He anchors a couple of shows on ABC.
Okay. And who's Dan Harris?
Dan Harris. This is him. I'm telling you. He's the news anchor.
I've just never heard of him.
Yeah, he's famous, but I mean, I don't really watch Nightline or Good Morning America. Yeah. So he had a nervous breakdown on Good Morning America.
You know what? I did see that. A panic attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he'd been doing some drugs and high stress job, and had been overseas covering war, so I had PTSD. And
right.
After that, got into meditation, and Dan's such a great advocate for it for guys. Maybe not like us, but like I used him a lot when I was recruiting players for our NFL pilot, because there's this gap between, and it's unfortunate because it doesn't have to be there, between the contemplative world and the sports world, where we'd have people, teachers from the Center for Healthy Minds saying, we're going to cultivate love and compassion. Right. And then I'd have to translate to like 50-year-old white guys from the rural Wisconsin, like, no, this is just like teamwork and caring. But it's great. I don't want to oversell it as a panacea for everything, but there's been a lot of research, almost eerily synchronized with the TBI and CTE research that has come out. Like, looking back on it, the researcher that I partnered with for this NFL pilot, Richie Davidson, was one of the first people in the world to show what meditation does to your brain physiologically. Right. So he put in Tibetan monks into fMRI machines, had them meditate, and actually, for the first time in the early 2000s, we had a picture of the meditating brain, and it changes. So this isn't psychological. We're actually rewiring our brains.
Jesus.
Yeah, and it's, again, don't want to oversell it. I think you have to have a cultivated practice.
No, for sure.
These guys that he put in the fMRI machines had been meditating for thousands and thousands of hours. So,
yeah.
But there's more promising research where just 10 minutes a day, so long as you do it for an extended period of time, is really good for you. Richie's got a term that really puts it on a basic level. He calls it brain hygiene. Like you floss. For your teeth, and you meditate just to have clarity of thought.
No, for sure. I mean, I've always been interested in it from just people's, like, because you meet like monks and Buddhists and Hindu people who it's part of their practice, and I've never really dabbled. I've done it a little bit, but I actually, for somebody who doesn't know how to meditate, like, what would the advice that you would give them? Because I would say the majority of America doesn't meditate.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think there's a few misperceptions that before you start to do it, you should know. Is that you're not trying to control your thoughts, and you're not trying to have no thoughts. The entire basis of the practice is to focus your attention. Well, there's a lot of different practices, of course. Mm-hmm. This is mindfulness meditation. So this is paying attention to your breathing. Is to focus your attention. And inevitably, thoughts will come. Whatever, this coffee doesn't taste that good. But I need to drink it because it's early. I got a meeting later today. Who's gonna, whatever. Mm-hmm. These thoughts just cascade, and the practice isn't to try to push them away or ignore them. It's just to acknowledge them and then go back to your breath. And the analogy that they use is that every time you refocus your attention, you're training your mindfulness muscle. So that's like a rep. that's something I think a lot of people sit down and they think they're hard on themselves, like I've failed because I think. When the Dalai Lama sits down to meditate each morning, thoughts come. Like we're thinking machines. It's inevitable. It'll be everywhere. But just lovingly giving yourself a moment to acknowledge that and then retrain your focus, I think that training permeates. There's this cliche in meditation, off the cushion, but that'll permeate in every aspect of your life. During traffic, if your kid's acting up, whatever. If you've trained it formally by sitting and meditating, I think you'll begin to see it show up in life.
I was actually looking at, I think it was actually last night. I was just researching just for my own purposes, and it kind of dawned on me, like, what the fuck is thinking? Like, what is it? And so I started like reading up a little bit, watching some videos on like what is thinking. We still don't really 100% know what thinking is, and basically we have like two departments in our brains, and one of them is this. An automatic system that kind of just does things. You blink, you breathe, you don't think about reaching for a bottle if you're thirsty. You just do it. It's just reactionary. And then you have this other one. If I was to ask you 2 + 2, that actually sits there and does the math in its head. Yeah. And it's interesting to me how, and they went into explaining how we learn. How we learn is we get the slower guy to do things repetitively over and over and over again, and then whatever you learn in chunks is what they call it. Then it goes to the automatic thing.
I see.
And what's interesting to me is that's how you train the body athletically, is you do things over and over and over and over again, and all of a sudden it becomes second nature. And that's what training is. You're just training your body to become second nature. Yeah. And it's super intriguing to me and that's why I feel like you said you watched me on the Joe Rogan podcast. That's what I said. Like, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have played football at all. I would have because I feel like I have a unique mind in the society that we live in today. I think of things a little bit outside of the box and not in an ordinary way that most people do. And I think I would have put that skill set to use before the Tao creeps into my brain.
Wow. I will say that the world's probably better for you being a free-thinking, open-minded person with the platform of a football player.
I appreciate it.
I remember reading the article in ESPN about how you kind of came out as an atheist.
Right. With rainbows.
Yeah. I mean, it's 2017. Most people, European American culture is increasingly secular. It's strange that someone had to quote unquote come out.
It is.
But I appreciated it as someone. I'm not atheist. I feel I'm agnostic. But there's power in what you did, and I feel like so many players these days are more politician than player. You know, it's like so and so TM. They're like this trademarked,
of course,
branded persona. And to break through that is a real gift. So I don't know, the world would have been deprived of at least one person who was visibly open-minded and progressive. And
man, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. And I mean it. Yeah,
I think the scary part of athletics today is the boom of social media. And I'll tell you why. When we were growing up, and I know more and more I get older, I start sounding like that old hating ass, but it's not the case, because I feel like it's a different, because I always accept the younger generation. Like you have to, because it's their freedom. It's the way they express themselves. But this, I think, is actually different, because never before, like, our parents didn't deal with the internet. You know, like they didn't have to coach us on the internet. We figured it out on our own. They didn't know how to coach us on the internet. But now the internet has changed the landscape of how players are marketed, how brands are marketing. It has changed everything. And one of those things is the individuality of players. And it's kind of, and I could be wrong in my analysis of this, but I think players are now starting to focus a lot on social media following, and that becomes a sick little black hole that you can go down, because I see kids, like, if you don't have a certain amount of social media following, they look at you a certain way, and it's like is that what we're coming to?
Yeah.
And I see kids aspiring to be YouTube stars, aspiring to be Instagram models. And it's like a sick cycle of like, we're gonna lose ourselves here in this internet pretty soon. I'm kind of scared of what the internet's gonna become, man, because it's still in its infancy.
That's a good point. People don't talk about how avant-garde the internet is. I mean, it's. I remember we had dial-up when I was.
Yeah, we was in chat rooms.
Yeah, my mom would yell.
Sex location.
Yeah. My mom would yell at me to get off AIM so she could call my grandma.
Yo, I used to battle rap people on chats. In chat rooms. I used to go to hip hop chat rooms and we used to be like murdering MCs. Shit was whack.
I used to check girls on AIM because their profiles would tell you like, I like Brian, I love Chris, and you like have to like. Sometimes they'd have it you have to highlight to see what they'd written.
Right. Those were the days.
Yeah, but it's crazy. I've got 14 nieces and nephews.
Right.
They just know how to do it. Like, it's weird. I mean, the particularly Apple products are so intuitive that like my 4-year-old, 5-year-old niece can just go to work,
grab an iPad and just
and do shit I don't know how to do. And it's eerie. It's like it's baked into their childhood.
I think, and see, that's important because I got 4 kids, right? And so that's one thing that I refuse to let go of. I will not be that cat that doesn't know how to operate technology because technology is the future. Yeah. And I just want to stay up on it for the mere fact that, one, it's interesting as shit, but 2, I don't want my kids knowing about shit on the internet that I don't know about. Like right now, I know there's a dark web. I know that these social media sites have predators. Like I know these things and I stay up on these things. Like I'm heavy on social media, heavy on Twitter. But I feel like I have to have my foot in that door always. I'm not like super interested in the clout and all of that bullshit. Like I just love I love the accessibility, like, right? So I love being able to reach out to strangers and they can talk to me however it goes. But I'm like deathly afraid of what's gonna come. And eventually what's gonna come is AI. And I'm not like super afraid of them taking us over like Matrix style, but our entire lives revolves around computers. Everything, your banking, the street lights, everything, the grid of the city, every single thing revolves around computers. And like, we're not a logical species, and science is rooted in logic, and computer is rooted in logic. That's a recipe for disaster.
It is frightening, and I think there's been a number of people that Sam has had on his podcast who make a great point. We always think about AI in like terms of robots, in terms of hardware. Right. We're already in the midst of intelligent software that communicates constantly, that listens constantly, that watches constantly. If I look up a bag I want to get, next time I'm on my Facebook, that bag. I mean, it already is scary. And it's.
I saw.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Man, I saw this. This is what scared the shit out of me. Facebook took down. I don't know if you heard about it. So you heard about this? Facebook took down an algorithm for I forget what it was, but basically what had happened was they had 2 separate AI departments talking to each other, but they had developed a language within our language. So they would say like meet, car, phone, and they were talking to each other. They developed a language. Jeez. And so they shut it down because they were. Yeah. I mean, goddamn.
Yeah, it's inevitable. We got to find a way to do it responsibly or protect ourselves. But
it's insane. I think you're purely at the mercy of, because if it ever becomes sentient, I think that's my biggest fear. Is like if AI becomes sentient, what is its prime directive? Our prime directive is just to survive and create and enjoy life. Like, would a machine want to enjoy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or what is it? Is it just like,
I forget the name of the experiment, but it's a thought experiment about if you created a machine to make paper clips, it would potentially see everything in the universe as an opportunity. Like it would turn, like there's iron in you. Right. Maybe I can use some Arian to make, so like, I don't
want to be a paperclip, bro.
I enjoy being a human too. It's frightening, but I think there's reason to be optimistic. I think there's people, Tristan Harris was a former Silicon Valley guy who's been very outspoken about the techniques that we use to manipulate people's buying interest online, and about how that's immoral. I think there's enough good people. I tend to be an optimist by nature, but
really,
I do.
Well, I'm a pessimist, man. Nice to meet you.
I'm a work in progress.
Right.
I'm cynical at times, but James Baldwin said when asked why he's an optimist, well, I'm alive, aren't I? So I've got two options: pessimism or optimism. It's an easy choice.
Yeah. I'm struggling.
It's hard. It's an easy choice. It's a hard action.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I think I had one of my boys on my podcast who was super brilliant. Have you ever heard of Inky Johnson?
No, but I looked it up briefly before I came on.
He's a beautiful human being, and I kind of figured out during the middle of our discussion, I kind of figured out like I'm a pessimist because of my eternal optimism. Like I want so much good for humanity, but then I look at humanity like you fucking suck.
Yeah.
So like it's like the cyclical movement of going back and forth on good or bad. But like I see things through a very negative lens because I just don't believe humans are inherently good.
Oh, I love the way you put that. And I think there's a lot of, I think of like George Carlin, the old comedian.
My guy.
Like such a crusty bastard.
My guy. You're on the fence of being an atheist, by the way. All these people keep bringing up.
I'll tell you why I'm not later. But yeah, the reason he's such a crusty bastard is actually I think because he has a huge heart.
Yeah.
And you see all this ugliness in the world. Sometimes the best coping mechanism, the best way to call it out, is dark humor.
Yeah, dark humor, and see that dichotomy of if you talk to most comedians, they're depressed. There's kind of that ongoing theme of comedians. They're depressed because you see, like you step outside of this zoo, and you're like, holy shit, this is wild. And that's like literally that's where my sense of humor came from. I grew up in the domestically violent household. Sometimes we didn't have food at night. Running water, like this is the basic necessities we're missing in our lives growing up. So the only way I knew how to cope was to fucking make jokes about it. And so I joke about everything. I joked about CTE. I joke about everything because it's the only way to cope. Like there's nothing you can do to change your circumstances other than change your current circumstances.
Oh, exactly.
And so I just joke all the time, man.
Yeah, when you're faced with an impossible situation. I've got a funny tidbit about dark senses of humor. The same woman I'm grabbing coffee with this morning, she's a filmmaker. She directed a documentary about her dad called Requiem for a Running Back. It's probably the best piece of art about this whole brain injury yet love of football and sometimes hate that is out there. Better than League of, it's the best.
It's out?
It's out. Yeah, it's not. I'll connect you with.
Man, please
Rebecca.
do. I would love. Please do. Because I used to be a running back.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it. So anyway, I was there right after I quit. I was interviewed for her documentary, and
you didn't quit, man. You walked away.
How about I quit football and I walked away from brain damage?
Yeah.
Strike a compromise.
Yeah.
So I'm at Rebecca's house, and another woman, Lindsay Wilbur, whose dad also had CT, was passing through LA. So Lindsay came over, and I walk into the kitchen. Rebecca's cutting up. I'm a vegetarian, but she's cutting up a big hunk of ground beef for burgers, and had the knife like right down on like a brain-sized pile of ground beef. And I said, "Hey, Rebecca, you look like Ann McKee, the pathologist that does all the." And right when I said, I'm like, "Oh fuck!" Like I didn't know where they were at with all this.
Oops. I've
got a dark sense of humor.
I've had a whole bunch of those, bro. Like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that.
But right away,
grabbing the words out of your mouth.
But right away, she cracked up laughing. And I've learned a lot of people that have to deal with this with brain injury in football develop a dark sense of humor, or at least an appreciation for it. So.
The funny thing is I have some guys, I got some buddies that are still in the league, and, we'll talk about it. And some are like that, little funny jokes every now and then, but some are like, they're afraid, and they're masking their fear in bravado. And it's scary to see that, because I think those kind of guys are the guys that when they walk away from football, there's not a lot to walk away to. They're not gonna. I don't want to say they're not gonna go anywhere, but they have real issues adapting. It's a huge problem, and I feel like the NFL does the same thing they do with everybody else, and they address it on the surface levels instead of hitting it head on. And actually, like, to me, if I was the NFL and I really cared, I would lifetime pay for mental therapy for people, meditation, like all the time. If you really care about your players, like these what they ended up doing was giving their lives for your sport. And like that's what bothers me about people like Roger Goodell's. Like, you sit up and make $40 million and you give all of these cliche ass answers to people who are actually going through the shit that you're kind of casting off as whatever you feel it is. It's annoying.
Yeah, and I've lost it. I mean, I was involved with some projects on the periphery that dealt with the NFL and NFLPA after I had walked away. Mm-hmm. I've lost patience. Maybe the people that I've done this study with, there's some other projects I've been involved with, they want to continue to pursue things with the NFL. I don't think it makes sense to invite the people that have caused the harm to be a part of the solution. I don't think the same thinking that got us in trouble is going to get us out of trouble.
That's somebody smart as shit said that, and I don't remember who said it.
I think Einstein said that.
Bam.
Yeah, I can't remember directly the quote, but
that paraphrasing is good.
Yeah, I'm a little confused why they are invited to take part in the conversation, particularly with like things like youth football, where they've got a direct
vested interest.
I mean, you wouldn't invite Philip Morris into a cafeteria to tell kids about lung health.
Right.
So I think what's beautiful, what's happening that I'm optimistic about is the grassroots effort. Right. So there's a lot of guys like Jake Plummer, Kyle Turley, a lot of guys that are addressing medical marijuana.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for that in place of opioids. I think there's other people like Rebecca creating art. There's this grassroots effort to address a problem from people that are doing so out of the best intentions and sometimes out of desperation. I think we'll see these things coalesce and find kind of programs that help former players, non-psychoactive cannabinoid oil, meditation. There's things that their efficacy is not proven. I mean, I had a conversation with someone that was doing a lot in the hyperbaric chamber stuff, and
I had one of those. I didn't feel anything, and I used to stay in it for however the recommended amount. Then I did it like 3 or 4. I actually bought one, and I just didn't feel anything. Yeah.
My philosophy is let's throw everything without side effects at this and see what sticks. But I'm with you. But I think what's needed is kind of a clearinghouse of these things, because from the individual player's perspective, it's not clear where to go to get help. And there's a lot of snake oil salesmen. There's a lot of people with financial interest that are influenced by the industry that are steering you one way or the other in terms of treatment and even just in terms of truth. Right. Where if we can just be candid about this, and for all of the frightening things about our technologically advanced world, one beautiful thing is we're in an era of radical transparency. Like these people that I think about this all the time with guys who are so heavily branded. One of two things is going on. Either like it's so phony, like you're a different guy behind the camera than you are in front of it, or you really are that boring. and I don't know which is worse.
Might be a little bit of both.
Yeah, true. But the cool thing about it is, information gets disseminated really quickly, and good information, and you can connect with people. Yeah,
and I think that's the double-edged sword of the internet. Is you have information, you have people like yourself who are doing their best to get good information out, and then you have people with, like you said, vested interests who are trying to combat for no other reason than to line their pockets. And that's just it's a scary world we live in, and that's why I try to stay abreast of. I'm a huge advocate for science because whether or not our science is 100% accurate, it is the most reliable pathway to truth that we know of. Like all of this other shit is just foo-foo. Yeah. It's woo, like as the famous term is. But it's the only way we know how to get towards the truth. And if it's 50% true or 40% true, it's better than 2% true, right? Yeah. So that's the only way we know how to do things as human beings. It's the best method that we have came up with. And so I'm a huge advocate for science and scientific literacy, scientific journals, actually doing research, and I don't mean research by YouTube videos. I mean doing research by looking at the scientific journals that are readily available to the public. You can go to Nature, you can go to all of these credible, and look and see what's credible. Why is one scientific journal more credible than another scientific journal? Like, anybody can start a blog. I can start a blog, but look at my references. Look at my references and see where I'm getting my information from. And that's how you usually, in my opinion, you pin what is more accurate than not. Is you look at any article that you read, because people throw articles at me all the time, and I look at the references. I'm like, where? Like, look at these references, man. They're blogs. Yeah. They're somebody's kitchen. They feel like that. There's a whole bunch of feelings out there. So the scientific literacy in our country is supremely lacking, and it's trickling into politics. It's trickling into sports. It trickles into everything, and that's that. Like I said, that double-edged sword of the internet is like, where are you getting your information? Know where you're getting your information from, and if it's a reliable source. And the reliability is strictly, it's like I said, it's our best way of knowing truth. So I think it's the best. It's the only way, man. I don't understand how people don't get that. It bothers me.
Well, you've got a healthy, you've prioritized truth and opinion in the appropriate order.
Right.
Most people are ideologues.
Yeah.
Most people are tied, whether
it's that word.
It's a good word. Whether they're whether it's religion or whether it's their position on football, for kids or whatever it is, people stake a claim, and then it's trench warfare and argument form and try to find all the facts that they can skew or manipulate or find.
Identity politics.
Exactly. And we have this stigma on changing your mind. Like, I think in my lifetime, my first exposure to it was with politics, where like it was a slight to call someone like a flip-flopper.
Yeah, that shit. Like, oh my God, that shit used to bother me.
Your opinion should change with new information.
100%.
You should, if you have the same opinion. When I was in second grade, my favorite movie was Men in Black.
Swag.
Yeah. Today, like, no disrespect, fine movie, not my favorite movie.
Absolutely.
And you should evolve. And that's, for people that are...
I used to hate that term, flip-flopper. Yeah. It's like, so you're telling me it's a bad thing to change your mind?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, but that's the silliness we live in. It's just that you get pinned to something, and it's that brand, it's that marketing. It's people have one-track minds. Like, that's where my pessimism comes from.
Yeah, and the disheartening thing. I'm beginning this. You're bringing me over to the pessimistic.
Come on over, bro. Plenty of room.
It's even simpler than facts and opinions. People don't even engage in a discussion. So like. Mm-hmm. Like, before you can have a dialogue about something, you need to mutually agree on the basic facts and discuss, objectively, the merits of the water bottle that sits before us. Because we got to discuss the whole thing, because from your side there may be a logo that I don't see. Mm-hmm. And once we've nailed all that down, then we can have opinions. But we just jump into the second part, and we've made like an art form of talking past one another.
Oh, people wait to get their point across rather than actually listening to you and responding. I've noticed that clearly, and I used to do that. And that's the thing. I used to do that. I used to talk to people, and I just couldn't wait to talk.
Yeah,
I have this point in my head that I'm not fucking listening to you. But like, what I've learned, especially like doing these podcasts, is like, I learned so much like this. Like I said in the Inky Johnson podcast, in the middle of me talking, in the middle of us conversing, I realized why I was a pessimist. Because I was listening to him, and I was listening to his words, and I was listening to myself, and it was a beautiful conversation. My pessimism stems from this. It would be lovely if me and you, if we had different ideologies, can sit across the table and discuss facts. But I think it's a small percentage of people that actually care about truth. I don't think people care about truth. I think people care about their day-to-day lives. I think people care about who's fucking who. I think people care about how many social media followers they have, what people think about them. Stupid, silly shit that at the end of the day, nobody gives a fuck about. One of the greatest things I've ever heard in my life is, I think, in your 20s, you, and I'm not 40 yet, but this is funny. So I was like, in your 20s, you care about what everybody's thinking about you. In your 30s, you stop caring about what everybody's thinking about you. In your 40s, you realize nobody was even thinking about you. But I've come to that a little early. Like I realized like nobody gives a shit. Like nobody cares about like whatever happened to me in my past where I had some drama or whatever like that. Nobody actually cares. Nobody goes to sleep and says, oh, did you hear what happened to Arian? Nobody gives a fuck. It's just like a topic piece that people come up and nobody actually cares. And once you realize nobody really cares, then that it's like this veil that just lifts it's off you. It's a burden off your chest because you carry so many opinions about yourself that nobody really actually has. It's insane. And that to me breaks down, it allows you to break down what's the most important things in life to me. And it's happiness and it's truth. And those two things are probably the most important thing to me. Like I have you, and you have to fight for happiness. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And truth, you have to fight for that as well. Like anything that you want to cultivate in your life, it has to be bled for. Like that's one thing football taught me. Like you have to bleed for this shit, and not physically, but like you have to put in the time. And happiness is one of those things. Truth is one of those things. If you want to get down to what is true and what is not true, you got to do the work because it's out there.
One thing I love about football is that it was never easy, but it was simple. And it's a good challenge, and it's right before you what needs to be done, and it's clear cut. Outside of football, and I found this more in the past couple of years, it's harder to read who's on your team. It's harder to understand simple truths about anything, and it makes me appreciate not the ease, because it is difficult to be a great football player, but the straightforwardness of it. And I love when you meet former players, wherever they fall on the ideological spectrum, there's this affability because they know what it's like, more so than other sports. They know what it's like to get embarrassed. No matter how good you are,
right.
You've been fucking laid out,
right.
Run over, beat badly on a play, you've missed a block that caused, whatever. It's humbling.
Yeah.
I think fighters are probably the same way.
Yeah. Sports in general.
Yeah. So it's a great lesson to learn. How do you strike a balance between, you said people don't care. You don't have to worry about it. How then do you strike a balance between, not going so far and being like a nihilist and be like, oh, fuck it, nothing matters. And actually,
right. I get that a lot because you're an atheist. You're a nihilist.
But, and I'm coming from the same wavelength here, but sometimes I struggle with that where it's like, if I go to that place where I'm like, oh, it doesn't really matter what you do, I take it too far and it's like, it doesn't matter what you do. So how do you...
Are you talking about personally or
personally or both or in general?
So I think, I don't know where this comes from, but I think that I have this innate wonder in me that wants to know about the natural world we live in, and not just the world, but the universe, how things work, why things work, why is there gravity? Like that's really what sparked my interest into science. It's like, what is gravity? I realized I was high and I was watching the Einstein documentary. I don't know why, but I was. And I saw that gravity bends light. And I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? And so I started doing a lot of research on what is light. We're still kind of we know what light is, but we don't really know what light is. Then we know what gravity is, but we really don't know what it is. And so I look at all of these things about the natural world, these simple things we take for granted, flipping the lights on and knowing that it takes time for light to come and hit my eye. These things intrigue the shit out of me. And these things I feel like is the most important things to live for, understanding these things. And we're not going to answer all the questions that I have in my lifetime, but one of the greatest things I've ever read was that George Washington Carver story, where I don't believe how he got to this point, but it was a great story. For the people that don't know, George Washington Carver was, I might butcher this, but he was praying to God on wanting to know all the secrets of the universe, and he wanted to know, and then God told him, focus on the peanut. And so he focused on the peanut, and lo and behold, he had hundreds of patents on the peanut before his life was done. So it was a great lesson in that you're not going to know everything. I don't think he really talked to God, but I love how he arrived at that conclusion, however he got there. But that's, to me, that's it. You find something and you fall in love with it. And to me, it's right now. I'm still on the fence of what I'm falling in love with, but it's gonna be something inside of science. And right now I'm taking math classes, so I'm just in love with life. I love living. I love breathing. I love meeting awesome people. I love talking. I love conversing about politics and science and religion. This is the shit that Aristotle and Socrates was famous for. They sat around like this. They got drunk and they said, "What is love?" Yeah. I don't know what love is. I mean, granted, they was fucking little boys, but they were, you know what I mean. But to me, that's what immortalizes us as humans. Is that innate question of why are we here? What is this? Those questions. So to me, that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it did. I enjoyed listening to the answer.
For sure.
Passion, that's what it is.
Yeah, man. I mean, you have to have a passion for life, man. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so pessimistic with people, but so optimistic with people is like, if they could just get over this hump of stop giving a shit about what people think about you. There's this beauty inside yourself, and I sound super Oprah right now, but there's like this beauty inside of people that like there's nothing anybody else on this earth. You're the only person on this earth that can offer what you've offered this earth.
True.
Like, and that's fucking beautiful to me. Yeah. But so many people deprive us of their gift because they're so worried about what everybody else thinks. Yeah. Go fucking be you. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Like, go be you. If you have to starve some nights, starve some nights. But man, give us your best. Like, you owe that to us. You owe it to yourself. I always tell people like that who are struggling with careers and they ask me for advice. I'm like dog, like you have to go be fearless. You have to drop that fear. Like, don't worry about where you're going to stay. Like, there's homeless people and they're fine. Like, it's shitty advice to give, but it's not shitty advice to give. You have to be willing to go explore yourself to the point where you're on rock bottom. And that's when you find out who you are. Like, unless you've been on rock bottom, it's hard to see that.
Yeah, I think I heard Jamie Foxx say something that I liked. He tells his kids, he asks them, what's on the other side of fear? And then when they don't respond, he says nothing. And that's it. I mean, I'm like this too. I've had some social anxiety, and I don't particularly like the limelight. But I'm always happy when I put myself out there afterwards.
Yeah, it's an accomplishment.
Yeah, and it's nothing's bad's gonna happen. There's no reason to be afraid.
And it was a paper shark, man. At the end of the day, like, you realize like this shit wasn't even that bad because you build it up in your head.
Exactly.
Like, oh shit, I'm gonna. And then it's like, it wasn't that bad. I'm all right.
Yeah, and there's a component of meditation that is involved with that. So your fight or flight response is your amygdala, and your meditation can actually calm your amygdala, the activity. So you can. It's funny. It has this perception of making you this docile, demure, passive, like you wear whatever.
Right.
For me, it's like made me more assertive and like more. Like I would withdraw all the time, and the more I've meditated, like I'm actually, I speak up and like intervene and get involved.
Me tell you something. I've been meditating on that, dog. No, but I think that's the beauty of looking inside yourself. And like I said, it sounds super fucking Oprah, man. But like it's really true. That's what age is teaching me. I know I'm in this purgatory of age right now, of like not old but not young. But that's what age has taught me, is like all these like cliche idioms that you grow up hearing, like they're fucking true, but you cast them off as corny or whatever as a kid. But like as you grow, you're like, really listen to what people are saying, especially older people, man.
Oh yeah.
I was my mother was my first episode of my podcast. It's awesome. But we looked at people's number one in hospices and in old people homes, people's number one regret. And these are people on their deathbeds. Like, if you could have anything back in your life, what is it? And the number one thing people said was that they wish that they did what they wanted to do with their life and not what people wanted them to do.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the biggest wake-up call ever.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And I am. I'm fucking coming out with an album. I'm learning guitar. I'm doing a podcast. I'm gonna direct some short films. I'm going to direct a documentary. I'm going to do everything I want. I'm going to math class. I'm going to learn physics. I'm going to do everything I want to do in my life.
I love it.
Because fuck people. That's what
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. There's you mentioned you've mentored. I love that. That's what it is.
For sure.
That's true.
He said that's what it is. He didn't have no $16 word from me. He said that's what it is.
You said you've been asked by people trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. I've been in and out of that myself the past couple of years. read a great book I just want people to know exists. It's called Designing Your Life.
Who wrote it?
Dave Evans and Bill Bennett. They're at Stanford. Stanford has something called the D School, the School of Design. So it's design thinking. And they've just applied those same principles to like not quite a self-help book per se, but a life planning book, I guess you could say.
Right.
But the number one thing that I got out of it is you build your way forward. So I'm this type of guy where I'd sit behind closed doors and plan everything, and then go out and try to execute it. And they kind of turn that inside out. Like you build your way forward. You try something, you learn, and you go from there. And getting into that more and trying that more has proved to be really great for me.
I think it's good for certain personality types. Because it's hard for me in good conscience to tell kids like, hey man, don't plan. Because some kids will interpret that differently than obviously you have the wherewithal and the cognitive ability to understand what that really means. Yeah. Doesn't mean don't think about what you're doing. But that's what I've noticed is you got to pander to the audience, and that's why like you can never quote mine people. I always try to take everything in context. So like what you're saying is absolutely true. Yeah. Like it is basically just saying fucking go for it. Go do it. Yeah. And fucking Will Smith just got on Instagram.
He's been making these videos recently, yeah.
Oh my God! So like at first, his first couple of posts, I was like, I didn't want to see this because like he was like Will Smith as dad, you know what I mean? Like, and that was my hero. So I was like, he's trying to work his phone. I'm like, oh shit, Will. But then you kind of see the brilliance in what he's doing, and he had this one post that was probably one of the most. It's fucking brilliant, and he was talking about failure. And he's always said, fail early, fail often, and fail forward. So people always look at failure as failure, and it's not. It's just like that old Thomas Edison quote when he was talking about making the light bulb. Who knows if he really did, but he was talking about making the light bulb. And they had over 2,000 or something like that, 2,000 trials that didn't work. And it was like, that's how he framed it. He said, I didn't look at it as me failing 2,000 times. I just figured out 2,000 ways that didn't work. Yeah. And that thought process of like, stop looking at failure as this roadblock and just look at it as like a gift.
Yeah, like a redirect.
Yeah, it's a gift, man. I always tell people like, you have to do something hundreds of times and get told no 100 times before you get that one yes. And that one yes is when people look at you like, man, look at me, he's successful. Like that's what the yes is. Yeah. But you don't hear about the no's. Yeah. They wasn't calling you successful with all them no's. Yeah. So I always tell like Will Smith is doing his thing on Instagram.
Well, that's another example of a piece of advice that needs. I agree wholeheartedly, but we can't romanticize failure. Like I think you have like the point being like be prepared to fail and don't let it define you, but like try as hard as you can.
Oh no, 100%. No.
But I think it gets misinterpreted. Like it gets romanticized. Like in Silicon Valley, when I played for the 49ers, I lived with some computer science people, and like in that world, like they kind of overdo it. Like fail. Well, like. Right. Try to succeed.
Try to win, though. Fail, but try to win.
And I think it's kind of a disservice. Like they get it there, and they like, of course, they're going balls to the wall to do whatever they can. Right. But if that advice to like a high schooler would inspire them to be like flippant towards their homework or something. Yeah, no, it doesn't matter if I fail.
So one of my regrets, though, I don't have many, bro. But I was filming at E60, and I think it was off my first year. I just led the league in rushing. And I went back to my high school and I talked to my high school and I was in front. They had an assembly and I was talking to and I know what I meant and it came out fucking off when I was like, don't listen to the teachers. Don't listen to adults. Like they kill dreams. And I'm looking back at it as a 31-year-old man, like, oh shit, no fucking listen to them. Like take it with a grain of salt. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but fucking listen to people who have been there. But that was just my young, and you have a whole bunch of hubris, and you think you know it all.
But I think you're onto something. It's just a difficult thing to convey. Like,
yeah, had I listened in context.
Had I listened to that 8th grade social studies teacher that was telling me it was about states' rights,
right? You might be flying the rebel flag right now. Yeah, exactly. Yo, so before I let you go, man, I definitely want to. That's probably rude, eating grapes while I'm talking to people. I want to ask you why. How do you define yourself as agnostic, and you're not an atheist? And it's always important to I think, define terms when you're talking to, especially with these topics, right? So, from my understanding, atheism is just the lack of a belief in a god or gods, and agnosticism is just a knowledge claim, right? So you can be agnostic about a lot of things. So you can actually be an agnostic atheist. I think the term atheism is it's a little harder, but the reason why I like to identify as an atheist is for people who are on that fence and need help getting over that hump, because it's such a taboo topic, and you can get socially shunned, you can get chastised for it, and to be a public figure that is open about it, I think it's more of a shock value. Like, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're atheist. You say that there is no God." Like, no, that's not. It doesn't make any claim on that. It just says, "I don't believe there's a God. I don't believe in a God." It's just a belief claim. But people like to pin you as you're asserting that there isn't one, and that's not my position at all. As soon as there's a single shred of evidence, I'll look at it and I'll be the first one to praise Jesus if he comes down and every knee bows. He's gonna have to do it at a very high point, but I just don't think it's very probable. So those are my definitions. So why do you identify as an agnostic?
The way I see it, I guess I have projected a little bit of that idea that someone who claims to be an atheist, or says they're an atheist, or self-identifies as an atheist, is claiming there is no God. Mm-hmm. So if there's some gray area there, that's my misinterpretation. I just stop short of being certain. So I don't know. I don't believe, based on evidence, that anyone can know. Right. And it's likely beyond our grasping. Right. Whatever the ultimate truth is, the irony of us. Not that we shouldn't have these conversations, we absolutely should, because there's redeeming value. But the irony in having them is that we're likely not capable, with our 100 billion neurons connecting in our brains, to ever figure any of this shit out. Right. I love to do it because I think it feeds off and it helps people learn about the importance of being informed and a lot of other things. I just don't know. Right. And I'm comfortable with the intellectual ambiguity. I think there's a great book I'll send you. Evan Thompson is what's called a neurophenomenologist. Okay, I'll break it. I've
never heard of that term, man.
It's great, and he may actually be a philosopher, but he writes a lot about neurophenomenology. So,
and what is Snuffleupagus?
Yeah, no, it was created when Eastern thought and Western neuroscience were meeting by this guy named Francisco Varela. Mm-hmm. Who's passed, but he's one of the co-founders with the Dalai Lama and a third man of the Mind and Life Institute. And so they're trying to discover these ultimate truths through Eastern and Western sciences. He coined the term neurophenomenology because in one camp you had these people that were doing more about the phenomena of enlightenment, and then you had Western neuroscientists who were just looking at the brain as if it were just the sum of its whole. So, and it's more than that, really. This guy named Evan Thompson has written a lot about it, and I want to send you his book because it's actually a great difference in the difference between, in my view, agnosticism and atheism. And he coined this term to describe people that were strictly focusing on the neuroscience as neuro-nihilists, because there is something there that's inexplicable. And he uses the variable of time. Like, this moment is the result not just of our neurochemistry, but also the confluence of factors that happen at this moment and then never will happen again and then come back. For me, it's a more optimistic take.
No, it makes sense. Not to cut you off, but it's a thought that I've had and kind of on track, kind of not on track. But it's why I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about free will, right? I'm unsure, because when you look at what science tells us, right? If you look at, not to get too deep to bore people, but if you look at space and time and the space-time continuum, how do I say this to where it's easy for people to follow? Because I've done a lot of reading on this, and so basically, we might not be sharing the same now. Does that make sense? So because it's a long line of reasons why, but basically, let me see how I put this so I'm not butchering the science of it. So we figured out that time is relative. So time isn't the same for everything and everyone in this universe. This is what Einstein's general relativity tells us. Time ticks according to how fast you're moving. And it's minuscule on Earth, but when you're dealing with large bodies of mass, it's why on Jupiter time would tick differently than it would on here. So actual time changes depending on how you're moving. Like light photons, they're kind of immortal in a sense, is they experience no time because nothing can go faster than the speed of light. The moment you go faster than the speed of light, you're traveling backwards in time. Yeah. So it's a whole bunch of complicated math. It's a whole bunch of complicated ideas. But basically what it boils down to is space is malleable. It's a real thing. So when people say space, the empty space, they don't mean emptiness. Like it's a thing that twists and bends. It's why we discovered gravitational waves earlier a couple years ago, which Einstein predicted. So basically, to wrap it all up, the space-time continuum, we're kind of just experiencing life as it is, but we might not be sharing the same now, which means it has weird repercussions, which means what already has happened, and what's already going to happen is going to happen. So I'm not necessarily sure if we have any free will. I did a terrible job explaining that.
No, that's.
But when you break down the science of it, of how we know light is the only fixed speed. It's a fixed speed, and that's how he figured it out. But it's a scary thought, and maybe we're just streams of consciousness experiencing it, and not really. Sam Harris actually wrote about this in one of his books. Okay. And he's basically saying like he doesn't believe we have free will either, and in a weird sense. So like every single moment in your life was a circumstance that led you to make the decision that you made. So you didn't have any control over the circumstances. You had a pseudo control over the decisions you made, but did you? That's his whole point. He's like, but did you? He always gives this thought experiment of like if I was to give you a city, right? Pick any city in the world. You can pick any city in the world.
Detroit,
right? So you pick Detroit. Now he pauses and he goes, all right, pick another city.
Cleveland,
right? So like you could have picked Tokyo. You could have picked Miami. You could have picked any city in the world, but you probably didn't pick Johannesburg. You probably didn't pick Cairo, right?
Yeah.
So what was it, like all these cities are in your head, but what was it that made you fixate on these certain cities? It's your life experiences. And he's saying you're not in control of your life experiences, so you don't really have that free will.
Yeah. No,
it's an incredible thought process that he got us there. It's interesting.
I followed his work and I'm familiar with that.
You should have stopped me, bro.
No. It's good. It's good for people to hear. Yeah. And just the simple fact that with everything going, it's like perspective. When I used the analogy of the water bottle between what's a dialogue and a discussion earlier, like we're all limited. We know far less than we know.
Right.
Or we don't know a lot more than we do know. So that's something that, like, a thought that I like to have, makes me more optimistic in interacting with people, is that everyone you meet knows something you don't. Every experience that you're about to jump into, like if you don't go to it like with so much ownership of like what you're bringing to it or what you want to say, and just like what you can experience and get out of, whether it's a conversation or a new book or a documentary or whatever. Right. I think this might speak to why you're so passionate about learning, is that it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
100%.
It's everywhere, and it compounds and it redeems itself. And then you're more. Now, whether or not that's free will or not,
it's an interesting thought experiment, man. And like I said, it's people like in my life, like I'm always talking about religion. I'm always talking about science. I'm always talking about love. I'm always talking about these things that are reverberating throughout our culture for thousands of years. And I'm like, man, stop talking about that shit. I'm like, what the fuck else is there to talk about? Like, these are the questions that have been haunting our species since our inception, since we were cognizant of our inception. Why are we not talking about it? That's one of the reasons why I started a podcast. Like, I want to explore myself mentally through other people. And like through conversations like this, I've learned like 7 or 8 new words fucking with you, man. So
I'll send you some things, man. I think it's really important not only that we talk about it, but that we do about it.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
meditation is a great way to do that. I think action's character. So I love to wax philosophical, but at the end of the day, you are what you repeatedly do. And
yes, sir.
We're living, you know, this is a shithole administration right now. So we need.
Boy, we have another hour long podcast on that one.
I think, if people are looking for what to do, why don't you go be nice to your neighbor, get involved in local movements, and the world needs action right now.
100%, man. Chris Borland, you are much more than the player that walked away from football, bro. You are an enlightened human being, well-read, well-spoken, passionate. From my vantage point, a beautiful human being. You might have bodies in your closet, I don't know. Yeah. But I feel like you made the right decision. You seem 100% at peace with it. And I'm happy that you crossed this path, man, because it was a beautiful conversation, and you know, we'll exchange information and we'll keep building, man, because you are a interesting cat, to say the least.
Well, thanks for saying that. Thanks for having me, and thanks for who you are and what you do, because you know, football players get pigeonholed as something, and I know guys are so much more, and you're the best example of that. And you do it the right way. I mean, there's nothing superficial about it. You're really passionate, and it's evident. And I enjoy listening to you, and I've enjoyed being on. Hopefully, we can do some more things in the future.
Oh, for sure, man. If there's anything you want to plug, is there anything you want to plug?
No, I've got some projects that are going on, but it's not really for public.
Got you.
So I'm going to see those through.
Can they find you? Are you on social media?
Twitter's the easiest.
Twitter at
Chris Borland _.
Chris Borland _.
That's it.
Just underscore.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. There's another Chris Borland out there that's been getting called a pussy for 2 years. He's like this computer fixer in Virginia. This guy with like a goatee who's like been getting shit on for 2 years.
Why am I a pussy? The funny that so LeVar Ball, he gets all kinds of shit online, and LeVar Burton, Geordi from Star Trek, he tweeted out, like, somebody was like, "You're a piece of shit, terrible dad," and so he retweeted, it's like, "This is the kind of shit I get on a daily." Thanks, LeVar.
Yeah,
it's just hilarious. But Chris Borland, man, I appreciate you coming on, man. You're a friend of the pod. Anytime you want to come on, man, I'll gladly have you, bro.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Arian.
Much love.